the Warning Council. The ancient space station known as Threshold Prime hung in the void like a monument to forgotten ages. Its crystalline spires reached outward in all directions, catching the light of distant stars and scattering it into rainbow patterns across the darkness. For 10,000 years, this station had served as neutral ground where the civilizations of the galaxy gathered to discuss matters of importance. Today, the Great Assembly Hall buzzed with anticipation. Representatives from across the known galaxy filled the massive chamber. The Valkyrie Empire had sent their finest diplomats, tall beings with silver skin and eyes that glowed like burning coals. The Synthoid Collective attended as well, artificial intelligences housed in sleek metallic bodies that hummed with barely contained energy. Warriors from the Kryn clans stood at attention near the back, their muscular frames covered in ceremonial armor that bore the scars of countless battles. Dozens of other species filled the remaining spaces, creating a tapestry of alien life that represented the diversity of galactic civilization. At the center of the hall stood the speaker's platform, a raised dais that floated several meters above the floor. Today's session had been called by the eldest races of the galaxy, those ancient civilizations that had existed long before most current species had even evolved. It was rare for the elders to call such a meeting, and their presence alone had ensured that every major power sent representatives. Ambassador Tarvek of the Valkyrie Empire adjusted his ceremonial robes as he waited for the proceedings to begin. He had attended dozens of these gatherings over his long career, but something about today felt different. The air itself seemed charged with tension, as if the station knew that momentous decisions were about to be made. A deep chime resonated through the hall, signaling the beginning of the session. The assembled representatives fell silent as three figures emerged from the shadows at the far end of the chamber. These were the elders, and their very presence commanded respect. The first to speak was Archon Vey, representative of the Luminari. His species had been exploring the stars when most others were still learning to control fire. His form was partially incorporeal, shifting between solid matter and pure light as he moved. When he spoke, his voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "We have called this assembly to issue a warning," Archon Vey began, his words carrying the weight of millennia. "Our scouts have detected a new species on the rise. They call themselves humans, and they inhabit a small blue world in a distant spiral arm. We have observed them carefully, and what we have seen troubles us greatly." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. It was unusual for the elders to concern themselves with primitive species. The galaxy was full of developing civilizations, and most were left alone until they achieved faster-than-light travel on their own. The second elder stepped forward. This was Matriarch Kess of the Eternal Archive, a being whose crystalline body contained the recorded history of 10 million years of galactic civilization. Her voice resonated like wind chimes in a storm. "These humans are dangerous," she stated flatly. "Not because they are powerful, for they are not. Not because they are numerous, for their population is confined to a single world. They are dangerous because of what they represent. They possess something we have not seen in any other species. They possess a will that cannot be broken, an adaptability that defies logic, and a creativity that borders on madness." Ambassador Tarvek could not help himself. He rose from his seat, his voice carrying clearly across the hall. "With respect, honored elders, how can a species that has not even achieved interstellar travel pose a threat to civilizations that span hundreds of star systems?" The third elder moved forward before anyone else could respond. This was Executor Thane of the Watchers, a species so ancient that no one remembered where they had originally come from. His form was humanoid but stretched and elongated, as if reality itself had difficulty containing his presence. "That is precisely the question that will doom you," Executor Thane said quietly. "You see their current limitations and assume they will always be limited. You see their divided nations and assume they will always be divided. You see their short lifespans and assume they will always be short-lived. Every assumption you make about them is wrong." The hall erupted in debate. The Synthoid Collective representative, a being called Unit Prime, projected its voice above the din. "We have analyzed their technological progress. By our calculations, they should not achieve faster-than-light capability for at least 2 centuries. They pose no immediate threat to anyone." "Your calculations are meaningless," Archon Vey responded. "Humans do not follow predictable patterns. We have watched them overcome impossible odds again and again throughout their history. They thrive in adversity. They grow stronger when challenged. Every setback only makes them more determined." General Kor of the Kryn clan stood, his massive frame towering over most other representatives. "The elders speak of fear, but I hear only paranoia. We are warriors. We have conquered hundreds of worlds. What can these humans do that we have not seen before? Matriarch Kessa's crystalline body pulsed with an angry light. They will surprise you in ways you cannot imagine. They will turn your strengths into weaknesses. They will find solutions to problems that should have no solutions. And when you finally understand what they are capable of, it will be far too late to change course. The debate continued for hours. The younger races presented their arguments with confidence. They had technology that humans could not match. They had resources that humans could not access. They had experience in warfare that spanned thousands of years. How could a single primitive species possibly threaten the established order of the galaxy? Finally, Ambassador Tarvek proposed a vote. Should the galactic community make contact with humanity, or should they follow the Elders' advice and leave them alone? The result was almost unanimous. Only 3 votes supported the Elders' position, and all 3 came from ancient races who had long since withdrawn from galactic affairs. Executor Thane watched the vote with what might have been sadness in his strange alien features. "You have made your choice," he said quietly. "We can only hope that some of you survive what comes next." The Elders departed without another word, leaving the younger races to celebrate their decision. Plans were immediately drawn up for first contact. The Valkyrie Empire volunteered to lead the expedition, eager to bring another species into the fold of galactic civilization. Within days, a fleet of 15 warships departed for Earth, carrying diplomats, scientists, and enough military force to ensure cooperation if the humans proved difficult. Admiral Zephyrin commanded the fleet from his flagship, the Dominion's Pride. He was a career officer who had overseen the integration of 7 primitive species into the Empire. This mission should be no different from any of those previous encounters. His ships carried weapons that could reduce cities to ash in seconds. His shields could withstand anything a pre-FTL civilization might throw at them. He had nothing to fear from these humans. The journey to Earth took 3 weeks. During that time, Admiral Zephyrin reviewed everything known about humanity. They were a carbon-based species, relatively fragile compared to most spacefaring races. Their planet had given them no natural advantages. They had no telepathic abilities, no energy manipulation, no enhanced physical capabilities. They were, by all measurements, thoroughly average in every way except one. They fought constantly. Human history was an endless series of conflicts, from small tribal skirmishes to massive wars that had killed millions. They fought over resources, over ideology, over territory, over belief systems. They even fought for abstract concepts like honor and freedom. It was wasteful and inefficient, but Admiral Zephyrin did not consider it threatening. Many primitive species went through such phases before achieving the wisdom that came with advanced civilization. The fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system. Immediately, every sensor on every ship began recording data about the human home world. What they found was both impressive and disappointing. The humans had indeed reached their moon and had established several space stations in orbit around their planet. But their technology was crude by galactic standards, barely more advanced than chemical rockets and primitive nuclear power. Admiral Zephyrin opened a communication channel to Earth, broadcasting on all frequencies that his sensors detected the humans using. "People of Earth," he began, his words translated into multiple human languages by the ship's computers. "I am Admiral Zephyrin of the Valkyrie Empire. We come as representatives of the galactic community. Your species has been deemed ready for contact with advanced civilizations. Prepare to receive our delegation." The response that came back was not what he expected. Instead of the grateful acceptance he had encountered from other primitive species, he heard confusion, suspicion, and demands for more information. Multiple voices spoke at once, representing different human nations and organizations. They asked questions he had never been asked before. Who gave the Valkyrie the right to decide when humanity was ready for contact? What did galactic community mean? What were the terms of this relationship? Admiral Zephyrin felt his patience wearing thin. "You misunderstand your situation," he said firmly. "We are offering you protection and guidance. In exchange, you will submit to our authority and follow our regulations. This is not a negotiation. This is how integration always works." There was a long pause. Then a human female appeared on his screen, wearing what appeared to be a military uniform. Her name tag identified her as Colonel Sarah Okonkwo, though Zephyrin had no idea what rank that represented in human military hierarchy. "Admiral," she said calmly, "we appreciate your offer, but humanity will need time to discuss this among ourselves. We're not prepared to make any commitments right now." "You have 6 hours," Zephyrin replied. "After that, we will begin the integration process whether you agree or not. Resistance will be considered a hostile act." He cut the transmission, confident that the humans would see reason. 6 hours was more than generous. Most species surrendered within minutes of seeing a Valkyrie battle fleet. But as those 6 hours passed, Admiral Zephyr's sensors began detecting unusual activity throughout the solar system. Human ships, crude as they were, began moving into defensive positions. Space stations that had appeared to be scientific outposts suddenly deployed weapons arrays. Most disturbing of all, the humans appeared to be evacuating their orbital facilities, sending personnel down to the planet's surface. They were preparing for war. These primitive, backward creatures were actually preparing to fight against a fleet that could destroy their entire civilization. When the 6 hours expired, Colonel Okonkwo appeared on his screen again. "Admiral Zephyrin," she said, and her voice carried no fear whatsoever. "Humanity has discussed your offer. Our answer is no. If you wish to establish diplomatic relations with Earth, we're willing to talk as equals. But we will not submit to your authority. We will not accept your protection. We govern ourselves and that will not change." Admiral Zephyrin could hardly believe what he was hearing. "You would choose destruction over the generous offer we have extended? You would sacrifice your entire species out of foolish pride." "We would choose freedom," Colonel Okonkwo replied. "Every single time. If you want war, Admiral, you'll have it. But I promise you, it won't be the easy victory you're expecting." The transmission ended. Admiral Zephyrin sat in his command chair, staring at the small blue planet that floated on his view screen. No species had ever rejected the Valkyrie Empire before. No primitive civilization had ever chosen conflict over the certainty of protection and advancement. He thought about the warnings the elders had given. For the first time, a small seed of doubt took root in his mind. But he pushed it aside. He was a professional military officer with decades of experience. These humans might have courage, but courage alone could not stand against the might of an interstellar empire. "All ships," he commanded, "assume combat formation. Target their orbital facilities. We'll demonstrate what happens to those who defy the galactic order." His fleet moved forward, weapons charging, shields at maximum power. In the command centers across Earth, humans watched the alien ships approach and prepared to defend their home. Neither side yet understood how completely this moment would change the galaxy forever. The Battle of Earth was about to begin and nothing would ever be the same. The Reckoning. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Earth, and the galaxy had learned to fear a name it had once dismissed. Humanity had not merely survived the Valkyrie assault. They had captured 5 warships, reverse-engineered the technology with terrifying speed, and launched a counteroffensive that left the Empire reeling. Now, human vessels moved through space with a confidence that made even the most powerful civilizations nervous. On the bridge of the human flagship Indomitable, Commander David Chin studied the holographic display showing the Meridian Belt, a vast asteroid field that marked the boundary between human-controlled space and the territories of the Kryn clans. In just half a year, humanity had gone from a single-planet species to controlling 15 star systems. They had done this not through superior technology, but through tactics that no alien strategist could predict. Commander Chin was a lean man with dark eyes that missed nothing. Before first contact, he had been a commercial pilot. Now he commanded humanity's most advanced warship, a vessel that combined reverse-engineered Valkyrie shields, captured synthoid weapon systems, and human innovations that made the ship faster and more maneuverable than anything else in known space. "Status report," Chin ordered, his voice calm despite the tension on the bridge. Lieutenant Maria Santos checked her console. 18 alien vessels approaching from multiple vectors. Kryn heavy cruisers, Valkyrie destroyers, and what looks like synthoid support craft. "They're maintaining formation, Admiral. This isn't a random patrol. They're hunting us." Chin allowed himself a thin smile. After humanity's initial victories, the younger races had done something unprecedented. They had formed an alliance specifically to contain the human threat. The Valkyrie Empire, the Kryn clans, the Synthoid Collective, and half a dozen other civilizations had put aside centuries of rivalry to face what they now called the human problem. It should have been hopeless. Humanity still had limited resources, fewer ships, and technology that was mostly stolen rather than invented. But they had something their enemies lacked: desperation, creativity, and an absolute refusal to accept defeat. "They think they've trapped us," Chin observed. "Let's show them why that's a mistake. Execute Protocol Chaos." The Indomitable suddenly changed course, accelerating directly toward the largest concentration of enemy ships. It was a suicidal move by any conventional military doctrine. But humans had stopped following conventional doctrine the moment aliens arrived at Earth demanding submission. General Kor watched from his flagship as the human vessel charged forward. The massive Kryn warrior felt his battle-hardened instincts screaming warnings. He had commanded fleets for 30 years and had never seen an enemy deliberately fly into a trap. It made no sense unless the humans knew something he did not. All ships, concentrate fire on that vessel, Kor commanded. Destroy it before it reaches weapons range. Energy beams and plasma bolts converged on the Indomitable from a dozen different angles. But the human ship danced between the attacks with impossible agility, its movements erratic and unpredictable. When weapons fire did connect with its shields, the damage seemed minimal. The Valkyrie technology humans had stolen was proving more effective in human hands than it had ever been for its original creators. Then the Indomitable did something that made no tactical sense whatsoever. It launched its entire arsenal of missiles simultaneously, not at the enemy ships, but at the asteroids surrounding them. Hundreds of projectiles detonated among the massive rocks, and suddenly the battlefield transformed into chaos. Asteroids that had been drifting peacefully for millions of years suddenly accelerated in random directions, their courses altered by the explosions. The carefully maintained formation of the Allied fleet disintegrated as ships scrambled to avoid collisions. In the confusion, smaller human vessels emerged from hiding places within the asteroid field itself, vessels so small that they had not registered on alien sensors. These attack craft swarmed over the scattered alien ships like predators sensing wounded prey. They did not try to destroy the larger vessels. Instead, they targeted sensors, communications arrays, and weapon systems with surgical precision. Within minutes, the Allied fleet found itself blind, deaf, and largely defenseless. General Kor roared in frustration as his flagship's systems went offline one by one. How are they doing this? They should not have the technology for such precise targeting. His science officer, a younger Kryn named Vex, studied the sensor data with growing horror. General, they are not using advanced technology. They are using modified mining lasers and commercial-grade explosives. They are improvising weapons from civilian equipment. The full scope of what was happening began to dawn on Kor. The humans had not outmatched them with superior firepower. They had turned the battlefield itself into a weapon, using the environment and their own creativity to neutralize technological superiority. It was warfare stripped down to pure tactical thinking, and the humans were proving to be terrifyingly good at it. Aboard the Indomitable, Commander Chen watched the battle unfold with satisfaction. "Open a channel to the Allied fleet," he ordered. Moments later, his face appeared on every functional screen in every alien ship. Behind him, his crew worked with practiced efficiency, a display of human capability that was becoming all too familiar to their enemies. "This is Commander Chen of the United Earth Space Command," he began, his voice carrying no triumph, only cold professionalism. "Your fleet is disabled. Your weapons are offline. You have two options. You can surrender your vessels and crews will be treated according to the Geneva Conventions, or you can activate your self-destruct sequences and waste lives for no purpose. You have 5 minutes to decide." General Kor's pride warred with his tactical sense. To surrender to these primitives was unthinkable. But to sacrifice his entire fleet when defeat was certain would be foolish. Before he could make a decision, another voice cut across the communication channel. "This is Unit Prime of the Synthoid Collective. We accept your terms, Commander Chen. Transmitting surrender protocols now." The betrayal sent shockwaves through the Allied fleet. The Synthoids, beings of pure logic and calculation, had analyzed the situation and concluded that surrender was the most rational choice. Their decision created a cascade effect. Within minutes, half the Allied fleet had surrendered, leaving the Valkyrie and Kryn forces isolated and outnumbered. Ambassador Tarvek received news of the defeat in his office on the Valkyrie home world. He stood at the window, staring out at the gleaming towers of the capital city while his aide delivered the devastating report. 18 ships lost or captured. Hundreds of crew members now prisoners of humanity. And worst of all, more technology fallen into human hands. "How did this happen?" Tarvek asked quietly. "We had superior numbers, superior technology, superior training. How do they keep winning?" His aide, a young diplomat named Ceres, hesitated before responding. "Sir, I have been reviewing human military history. I think I understand what makes them so dangerous." "Explain." "Every other species in the galaxy achieved space travel during a time of relative peace and unity. We developed advanced technology because we had the luxury of cooperation and long-term planning. But humans? They reached space while still divided into hundreds of competing nations. They developed their most advanced technology during their worst conflicts. War is not something they learned from other species. War is woven into their very evolution. Tarvek turned from the window, his glowing eyes fixed on his aide. You are saying they are better at warfare because they have practiced it more? I am saying they are better at warfare because it is what they are, Ceres replied. Every human carries the genetic legacy of survivors who fought and won countless battles across millions of years. They do not fight to conquer or for honor or for logical reasons. They fight because at some deep level they enjoy the challenge. They see warfare as problem-solving and they are very good at solving problems. The ambassador felt cold fear settling into his core. If Ceres was right, then the elders had tried to warn them about something far more fundamental than simple military capability. They had warned about a species whose entire existence had been shaped by conflict, whose creativity and adaptability had been honed by endless competition with their own kind. On the neutral station of Threshold Prime, the three elders gathered once again. They watched holographic recordings of the Battle of Meridian Belt, their ancient faces showing no surprise at the outcome. They fought exactly as we predicted, Matriarch Kess observed. Using creativity to overcome technological disadvantage, turning enemy strengths into weaknesses, adapting faster than their opponents could respond. Archon Vei's form flickered with something like sadness. The younger races still do not understand. They think humanity's danger lies in their military victories. They do not see the real threat. Executor Thane gestured toward the holographic display. Show them what comes next. The image shifted, revealing something that made even these ancient beings pause. Human ships were appearing throughout the galaxy, not as military vessels, but as trade ships, exploration craft, and diplomatic envoys. Wherever they went, they brought gifts of technology, offers of alliance, and most importantly, ideas that challenged the established order. On a Valkyrie colony world, human traders were teaching locals about concepts like democracy and individual rights. On a synthoid research station, human scientists were collaborating with artificial intelligences to develop new theories that neither species could have achieved alone. On a Kryn warrior world, human martial artists were demonstrating combat techniques that the proud warriors had never imagined. This is the true danger, Executor Thane said quietly. They do not just conquer through force. They conquer through inspiration. They make other species question everything they have accepted as natural law. They spread ideas that cannot be stopped with weapons or shields. Back on Earth, in the headquarters of the United Earth Space Command, Colonel Okonkwo sat in a meeting with representatives from every human nation. The woman who had defied Admiral Zephyrin 6 months ago now coordinated humanity's expansion into the galaxy. We have received formal requests for alliance from 6 different species, she reported. Not major powers but smaller civilizations that have been dominated by the empires for centuries. They see what we have accomplished and want to learn how we did it. Are we ready for this? Asked Ambassador James Morrison, Earth's first interstellar diplomat. 6 months ago we were fighting for survival. Now we are being asked to lead a galactic revolution. We don't have a choice, Okonkwo replied. The major powers will not accept our independence. If we stand alone they will eventually overwhelm us. But if we build a coalition of free species, all supporting each other, all refusing to accept domination, then we create something that cannot be easily destroyed. You are talking about changing the entire structure of galactic civilization, Morrison said slowly. Yes, Okonkwo confirmed. That is exactly what I am talking about. The elders warned the galaxy about us because they knew we would not accept the status quo. We cannot help it. It is who we are. So we might as well embrace it. 3 months later, the confrontation everyone had been dreading finally arrived. An alliance fleet of 300 ships, representing every major power in the galaxy, gathered at the Nexus Gate, a strategic location that controlled access to the core worlds where humanity had been expanding its influence. If humanity wanted to continue its expansion, they would have to go through this fleet. The human fleet that arrived to face them numbered only 47 ships. It was absurd. It was impossible. And yet, every alien commander present remembered what had happened the last time they underestimated humanity. Admiral Zephyrin commanded the Alliance fleet from the same flagship he had taken to Earth 6 months ago. His failures had not cost him his position because no other Valkyrie officer wanted the responsibility of facing humans in battle. He opened a channel to the human fleet, and was not surprised to see Commander Chen's face appear on his screen. Commander, Zephyrin said formally, you are outnumbered 7-1. We have more firepower than your entire fleet combined. Surrender now and we will guarantee the safety of your crews. Chen smiled, but there was no humor in his expression. Admiral, I appreciate the offer. But before we begin fighting, I think you should see something. He gestured to someone off-screen, and the communication feed split to show another image. It was Earth. But Earth was not alone. Surrounding humanity's home world were hundreds of ships, representing dozens of species. Some were former subjects of the Valkyrie Empire. Others were independent civilizations that had chosen to ally with humanity. All of them carried weapons, and all of them were broadcasting a unified message. "We stand with humanity," the message proclaimed in 100 different languages. "If you attack them, you attack all of us." Admiral Zephyrin stared at the display in disbelief. In 6 months, humanity had built a coalition that represented nearly a quarter of known galactic civilization. They had not done it through conquest or intimidation. They had done it by offering something the empires never had: genuine partnership between equals. General Kor appeared on a secondary communication channel, his scarred face twisted with rage. "This changes nothing," he roared. "We still have superior force. We can still crush them." "Can you?" Chin asked quietly. "Can you really? Because from where I stand, Admiral, you have already lost. Oh, you might win this battle. You might even destroy every human ship here. But you cannot stop what we have started. Ideas are more powerful than weapons, General. And the idea of freedom, once it takes root, cannot be burned away with plasma cannons." For a long moment, silence filled the communication channels. Every commander in the Alliance fleet was calculating odds, considering possibilities, weighing the cost of victory against the price of defeat. Finally, Ambassador Tarvek's voice cut through the tension. He was not part of the military fleet, but he had positioned his diplomatic vessel nearby, hoping against hope that war could still be avoided. "Commander Chin," Tarvek said, and his voice carried the weariness of someone who had finally understood a truth he had long denied. "What exactly do you want?" "The same thing we have wanted from the beginning," Chin replied. "We want to be left alone to govern ourselves. We want the same right for every species in the galaxy. We want a new galactic order based on cooperation instead of domination. And we want the empires to understand that the age of forcing primitive species into submission is over." "You are asking us to give up everything that has maintained order for thousands of years?" Tarvek protested. "I am telling you that the old order is already gone," Chin corrected. "You can either adapt to the new reality, or you can fight a war you cannot win. The choice is yours." On Threshold Prime, the three elders watched the confrontation unfold. Around them, holographic displays showed the reactions throughout the galaxy. On 1,000 worlds, beings of every description watched to see if the Alliance fleet would attack or withdraw. "They have reached the critical moment," Matriarch Kess observed. "The empires must decide whether to accept change or cling to the past." "The humans have played this perfectly," Archon Vey admitted. "They gave the empires a way to retreat without losing face. They offered partnership instead of demanding submission. They learned from the mistakes of their opponents." Executor Thane's strange form seemed to shimmer with something that might have been approval. "Perhaps this is why the universe creates species like humanity. Not to conquer, but to shatter stagnation. Not to rule, but to remind others that change is the only constant." At the Nexus Gate, Admiral Zephyrin made his decision. He had seen too much death, too much destruction, all in service of maintaining an order that suddenly seemed fragile and outdated. He thought about the warnings the elders had given, warnings he had dismissed as paranoid fear from beings too old to understand the modern galaxy. "All ships," he commanded, "stand down. Ambassador Tarvek, the military yields to diplomatic authority. This is your problem now." Relief and frustration warred across Tarvek's features, but he accepted the responsibility. "Commander Chin, I propose a formal conference. Representatives from all species, human and non-human alike. We will discuss the terms of a new galactic order. I cannot promise we will agree, but I can promise we will listen." Chin nodded slowly. "That is all we have ever asked for, Ambassador. Send us the details and we will be there." The fleets withdrew without firing a shot. Throughout the galaxy, billions of beings released breaths they did not realize they had been holding. The crisis had passed, but everyone understood that nothing would ever be the same. 3 weeks later, on Threshold Prime, the greatest gathering in galactic history convened. Hundreds of species sent representatives to negotiate the framework of a new civilization. The discussions were heated, the disagreements profound, but gradually, painfully, a new structure began to emerge. The empires would not disappear overnight, but their absolute authority was broken. Species would have the right to govern themselves. Military conquest would no longer be considered acceptable. And most importantly, the younger races would no longer dictate terms to newly discovered civilizations. Colonel Okonkwo attended the conference as Earth's primary representative. On the final day, as agreements were being formalized, she found herself standing on an observation deck with Executor Thane. The ancient being had watched the entire conference from the shadows, never speaking but always present. "You warned them," Okonkwo said quietly. "The other elders warned them too. But no one listened until it was too late." "It is the way of younger races," Executor Thane replied, his voice like wind through ancient ruins. "They must learn through experience. Words alone are never enough." "Why did you warn them at all if you knew they would not listen?" The elder was silent for a long moment. "Because we hoped we might be wrong. Because there is always a chance that wisdom might prevail over pride. And because—" He paused, something like a smile crossing his alien features. "Because we wanted to see what you would do when challenged. Your species has exceeded even our expectations, Colonel. You have changed the galaxy in ways we did not foresee. Is that a good thing?" Okonkwo asked. "Time will tell," Executor Thane replied. "But I suspect that 1,000 years from now, historians will mark humanity's arrival as the moment the galaxy truly began to grow up. You taught the younger races a valuable lesson. Power without wisdom is meaningless. Technology without ethics is dangerous. And no civilization, no matter how advanced, has the right to dictate the fate of others." Okonkwo looked out at the stars, thinking about the journey that had brought humanity to this moment. 6 months ago they had been alone, facing an impossible threat. Now they stood at the center of a new galactic order, partners with dozens of species and building something better than what had come before. "The elders warned the galaxy about humans," she said softly. "They said we were dangerous. Were they right?" "Absolutely," Executor Thane confirmed. "You are dangerous to tyrants, dangerous to stagnation, dangerous to those who benefit from an unjust order. That is precisely the kind of danger the galaxy needed." He turned to leave but paused at the doorway. "A final word of advice, Colonel. Your species has won a great victory, but your real challenge begins now. It is easy to fight against oppression. It is much harder to build something better in its place. Do not let your success make you complacent. The galaxy is watching to see if humanity can live up to the ideals you fought for." Then he was gone, leaving Okonkwo alone with her thoughts and the weight of responsibility for humanity's future. On Earth, in a small apartment in what had once been called Lagos, a young girl named Amara watched the news reports about the Threshold Prime Conference. She listened to the speeches about cooperation and partnership, about freedom and dignity for all species. And she wondered what role she might play in this new galaxy that humans had helped create. The elders had warned the galaxy about humans. They said no race took it seriously. And they were right on both counts. But what the elders knew and what the younger races had to learn through painful experience was that humanity's true strength was not in their weapons or their tactics or even their stubborn refusal to surrender. Humanity's strength lay in their belief that a better world was possible, and their willingness to fight, sacrifice, and work tirelessly